Welcome to Create a Coffee. Today we have Ariel Rae, a local author and publisher known for her book series, the Blood Hunted series. So welcome, Ari. I'm so glad we were able to connect and have a conversation about being an indie author and kind of writing and just creativity in general. So thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So tell me tell me a little bit about yourself, like your journey so far, where you started in terms of like getting the spark for writing. Um,
Yeah, I've been writing since I was in fourth grade, so it's been
wow.
my whole life pretty much. My first story ever that I did was like this really weird thing about getting a haircut. So, come a long way since then. So that's good. Yeah, so and then I've been publishing for over 10 years, and with Ariel Rae specifically I've been publishing for I guess we're on 1.5 years now. So it's been a shorter journey for that, but fun. Definitely getting into the groove of things. So
Cool, cool, cool. So, I mean, you mentioned, you've been publishing. Do you have another pen name that you
yeah,
publish under?
so that's my young adult pen name. So that's R.A. Deslitz. So yeah.
Oh, okay, cool, cool. Um, so one of the things I really find interesting about meeting people in this space or just in the creative space in general is, how do they create? Like what are like whether it's writing a book or drawing or painting or just, creating music. Everybody has their own style, their own process. I was just wondering, could you give like a little tease or insight to like your creative process?
Yeah, it really depends on the book, and it always shifts, which I find interesting because I feel like I'm a little bit of an enigma when I try to say exactly what it's like. Sometimes I design the cover before I even start writing the book. Sometimes I create a playlist before I start writing the book. Usually it's a song that kind of kicks off the whole vibe. So when I'm outlining, I will usually listen to the same song on repeat for however long it takes me to outline,
Okay.
which makes my Spotify Wrapped all kinds of weird at the end of the year. Because sometimes I'll listen to a song for an entire day straight, on headphones to not bother anyone else but my own brain. But
See, I drive my wife nuts with music because we are not super compatible with musical taste. Every once in a while, we find that genre there's a crossover, but so you hit on something that's so interesting to me. So
yeah.
I just started writing a year ago. Like
Hmm.
I've never written anything, and it became this passion project for me for what I did. Um, but music is such an influence on
Hmm.
me that as I started writing, I was like, oh, I need something to like set the mood or whatever. I never even thought of doing the cover first. That that that's mind numbing because I think the story kind of would dictate maybe how the cover would look, but
Hmm.
it doesn't mean I don't think about the cover. But going back to the music, so I created playlists as well.
Yeah.
So like we both are in the fantasy genre. So when I was in say a tavern or in an area where I would have actually that tavern music playing just to kind of set the mood in my head for like the background noise and like things that the characters might have to do to compensate for it. Or I actually ended up really finding a band, and that's what I seem to be doing now is I find one artist that kind of sets the mood for what I'm trying to get from a scene or a story, and that
Hmm.
becomes my my focal point. So like Magic Sword to me is like my go-to right now just because of how it's all instrumental and the words don't get in my head, and that's the thing I kind of lean to. Is your music tracks instrumental or are they?
No. It's lyrics, and I will literally like sing along as I'm writing, which I don't know how I do that, but I do.
Oh, oh my God.
This
I
is
one
wild.
time I tried listening to like tracks with lyrics and I started typing the lyrics without realizing
Oh
it. And I was
yeah,
like,
no.
"Oh, nope, can't do that.
That's not
Just
gonna
can't
work.
do that. We need to like kind of like not do that." So, it's always instrumental for me. And lately it's been very kind of dark synth. I don't know
Yeah.
why, but that's kind of where it's coming from me. So, uh, what type of genre of music do you really listen to? You like kind of go
It
go through?
it depends on the book. Blood Hunted was a lot of like indie rock bands. And then I had
Okay.
two separate playlists. I had one for Voss and one for Scarlet, and Voss's tended to be more like there's a song Golden Boy, and like there's certain songs in it that are because he has a POV in book 2 and 3. So
Yep.
but his words tended to be more like I don't know. I don't know. It's different because like with hers, it was all very like moody. And this is my cat. He's probably going to bother us again. So this is Munster. Hi. Um,
Hello, Munster.
but
Uh,
so
I could see Moody for um, Scarlet. I mean, it's just because I read Blood Hunted before.
yeah.
I really wanted to get to know your work, at least a part of it, before having this chance to talk with you. But I could see that, and Golden Boy kind of really does resonate with Vox because
Yeah.
he's kind of the best way I can just kind of describe it is with a head move.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's yeah. Um, so in terms of like the writing process, so you mentioned outlining. There's a couple ways of writing.
Mhm,
My first one, I just kind of just free wrote, and then I ended up
mhm.
going back and fixing, going back and fixing, going back and fixing. Trying like, wait, did I talk about this somewhere else? And going back trying to figure this out and all that. I tried outlining this time on my next one, and I have a rough outline, but that's all I'm doing. Do you always have an outline, or does it usually you
Um,
freeform write and just kind of see where you go?
I didn't used to have an outline, and I think now it depends. I think for book one, I usually go into it with an outline now. He's gonna be so distracting. He's right there. So book one, I go into with an outline, and then book two, I sometimes because it usually starts right where book one ends, so I know exactly where I'm going at least for that first little section. I always know where it's going
Hmm.
to end even before I outline. I usually have the ending in mind before I even start the book. Goodness gracious, buddy. you know,
Hey, it just adds humor. It's just going to add humor to this podcast.
yeah. You're good.
That's
You're a
all.
good boy. Okay.
He's a good little tiger.
He is. He is good.
Um,
Um,
so
so book two for the current work in progress, I finished about 15,000 words of it before I outlined the rest of it.
okay.
So I did quite a bit of writing before I even started outlining, but I knew where I wanted the ending to be, and I do some discovery writing in the second book before I outline it, and I think that's because I want to see what kind of subplots come through that discovery writing and the way the dialogue
Hmm.
works, and then I'm like, oh, okay, that's not something that I would have thought about had I just been outlining. And then I'll
Right.
outline based on like how the beginning went. So yeah.
Right. Right. I I find outlining is a good just I'm going to call it backbone, just to
Yeah.
help guide you through the main arc of the story. But then it you could branch off at any time, and you could
Hmm.
say, you know what, I'm going to twist it, or I'm going to because my think box is my car. It's usually when I'm in the car, I come up, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, these are, oh my God, okay. And then I have to like quickly do a voice memo, and then I'm like, okay, but that changes the outline, but that's okay. You know,
Hmm.
it's everything is flexible, everything is can be changed. It's all about, making sure that you're happy with the overall outcome. It's really you're right for yourself in a lot of ways, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. If
Yeah,
you're not
because if
happy
you
with it, what's the point?
no no, and I mean for me, it's just one of these new things for me because I was terrified to write my whole life.
Hmm.
Uh, like literally, I would have like almost panic attacks when I had to write a term paper in high school because it was uh, I have a form of dyslexia where words get jarbled and stuff like that. But I've made lots of headway on it. So, but now to me it's just so weird that I have this new passion for it. So it's to me it's like it's my fun creative space just to escape for a couple hours a week, hopefully if I'm lucky to fit it in. Actually, which kind of leads me into my next thought is balancing, time because we all have super crazy lives. This is not my, I'm going to call it day job. It's
Hmm.
a passionate hobby because I had, have to pay the bills and everything else. Is this what you do full time or is this
No, no, it's still a balancing act for me too. So hi. Yeah, it's still definitely a balancing act, and it's a balancing act with I have 4 cats, so that's a fun fact. And they require a lot of attention, so
yeah,
as you
do,
can probably tell based on this one. Um
especially one at least.
so yeah, it's definitely a balancing act. So it's definitely something that like if someone's passionate about it, I will always say like pursue it, pursue it, pursue it. Like
Yeah,
just do it and start doing it. Um but if it's not something you're passionate about, this isn't something that I think you go into without passion. It's not like a oh, I'm just gonna do this as like a I don't like it's fun, but it's hard work. It's a lot of work. So if you're not passionate about it, then it's an uphill battle. So
right. Which we had a chance to connect the other week, and we were talking about the challenges um, that face being like an indie author or indie publisher. There's just a lot of uphill battles,
mhm.
because you have to do it because you love it or
Yeah.
you just it's fun because there's just a lot there. When I started to go down this journey, which still at times I'm kind of like I can't believe I'm doing this. I said it's not about selling, it's about doing. To say that okay, you did this. Did you have fun?
Yeah.
Yes. Would you do it again? And I was like, yeah, I'm crazy enough to do this again. So I'm doing it again. Um, it was never about, oh, I hope to sell 10,000 books or 1,000 books or 1,000 copies of it or whatever. What are your insights? We had a conversation, but I just want to get your additional thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think with sales, like going back to what we talked about last week, is like um there's definitely different journeys for authors to success, I think, and I'm still journeying to find my own. I have like a modicum of what I consider like I have way more success now than I did prior. So,
Hmm.
baby steps in the right directions. I think that's something that you hugely have to celebrate when you're new to this platform, because if you forget to celebrate the small wins, because not everyone becomes an overnight success, and I know we hear so much about the overnight successes because they become overnight successes, but there's
Right.
also some authors that seemingly it looks like they became overnight successes, but they actually have a large backlog before that one book got them to the overnight success. So they're not actually overnight successes in any way, shape, or form. But that's the book that made them big. So everyone kind of assumes that's their breakout book. And sure, that's the book that made them famous, but it's not actually their breakout book. So, um,
Yeah.
and with sales, like it'll depend on you. Like some people are really successful at social media because they are good at getting in front of a screen and talking a lot about their book and sales pitching it. Like for me, I'm better with talking to people one on one than I am in group settings. So I feel like I do better when I'm at like a sales table in person with other people, and that's my comfort level because I can talk to people one on one about random things.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about, you kind of have to pay the dues in a lot of ways,
Hmm.
like, like with any career or anything that's really worth doing, I think in life, you have to put the time in, and
Yeah.
sometimes you get that lucky break. It's just how it works out. But like it takes a while to one hone your craft, as well as just understanding the landscape. Like last year I was in learn mode for
Hmm.
90% of the time. I'm like, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? I don't know. I mean, I watched so many YouTube videos as well as reading blogs and talking to people. I was lucky enough where one of my coworkers actually used to be in the publishing industry for 20 years. So I was like, "Hey, can I talk to you for like 10 minutes?" And this person was just like, "Well, I've been out for a while. It's kind of changed." So like
Yeah.
he worked for a big publishing house. He goes, "It's just not done that way anymore." He goes, "But this is kind of what I can tell you." So I was like, "Okay, cool." Um, in
And
terms of like, yeah, go ahead.
sorry, just to that point is the landscape does change a lot, since I've been self-publishing for a while. Like, there's so much more stuff now, even software and stuff like that, that didn't
Hmm.
exist when I started. So, yeah, it's things shift constantly. So it's one of those, like, even if you've been doing it for a while, you're still kind of learning because you just are
Hmm.
trying to keep up with what's going on. So,
Right. Well, you just hit on one of my favorite topics, tools. So I am a trained graphic artist, UI designer. That's my like day job. So I'm a software guy. And I just, even in that industry, software has flip flopped and changed so many times. Like, what is the tool to do this? Like Adobe
mhm,
used to be the big guy. They're not the big person anymore, and in a lot
yeah.
of ways. I mean, for Photoshop, yeah, for photo, yeah, they're still it. But for most everything else, they're really not the big players anymore. Um, what is your preferred platform or tool that
Yeah.
you use?
I use Scrivener. Right now, I recently got back into using For the Words, which is
I don't know
it's
that one.
it's it's a gaming platform, but about writing. So you have to like slay monsters in order to gain experience, complete quests, but you slay the monsters by writing a certain amount of words. Um, so I've been
They gamified writing.
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
For the words with the number
interesting.
4, numerical 4.
Okay.
So I've been using that again, just to kind of like recenter myself and have a little bit more fun with writing because I was when you start to think of it as a business, which I was kind of getting back into that mindset of thinking of it as a business of like, how do I market? How do I market? How do I market? I wanted to get myself out of that to really focus on the creative element again of just having fun with my writing and by gamifying it, because I am a gamer outside of my writing life, that kind of got me refocused on just like, I do this because I love it. So
Okay.
that was like a reality check of like, I do this because I love it, not,
Not
marketing
for
is its
business.
own
Right.
beast. So
Yeah,
yeah.
marketing is hard. So this is not, so I need to know, I'm a old school gamer. I don't game so much anymore. But I grew up in the 8-bit and 16-bit and 32-bit
Mhm.
era of gaming. What is your favorite game of all time? I'm just really curious. Do you
Of
have one?
all time,
Yeah.
um, I'd probably say Portal.
Okay, so you're a PC gamer.
I mean, I play on a lot of platforms, so
Okay. Okay.
but
Okay.
yeah, Portal is
Okay.
probably because there's a good storyline. There is a character arc. You have to figure out puzzles as you go. So
Okay.
and it's funny, in like a sarcastic kind of dry humor way, which is I love. So
Okay, cool, cool. Yeah, I mean, I was definitely an RPG player, for
hmm
the console. I never really got into PC gaming. I was more of a, I needed the controller and the
yeah,
buttons. Now you have that with PC gaming, but when I was gaming, it was still keyboard and like
hmm
I don't know how people did the arrow keys and the space bar to move through stuff. I was like, I don't get that. I was a big Street Fighter fan and all that, but like for me, gaming hit its pinnacle on the 32-bit era. After that, it just got prettier, but the games didn't seem to move anymore. But my all-time favorite is a little-known RPG for, I don't know if you ever heard of the TurboGrafx from back in the day, but it's called Eastbook One and Two. It's the first CD-based role player ever released on a CD platform for a gaming
hmm,
system. Went back in 1989, it came out, and it had 27 minutes of spoken dialogue when we were used to like the NES,
yeah.
and it was like 30 hours of gameplay, and I just got pulled into it, and it's a monstrous series now in Japan, and people are starting to recognize it now. So if you ever get a chance, look up the E series, Y apostrophe S. So,
Okay.
so I'm a Scrivener user as well.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to figure out, first I started in Google Docs, and then because that way I could write wherever I want. But then Google Docs became slow as the files started to get larger and larger. I was like, okay, this is
Yeah.
starting to like chug. It's not meant for this. And then I was like, well, what's the best one out there? There's a lot of them out there. I ended up with Scrivener because one, relatively inexpensive, and it's for Windows and Mac. I'm a Mac user. And it allows you to move stuff around really easily,
Yes.
as
Yeah.
well as do certain things. I highly recommend Scrivener for doing your core writing. It's
Yeah.
a writing app.
I
It's not Word. It's not. It's meant for like text. It's not fancy in terms of that, but you
absolutely.
can do a lot with it, like storyboarding, cork boards, vision
Mm-hmm.
boards. It's all there, character sheets, notes, all that. So it's really powerful in that fashion. So.
The thing that I love about it too is I have like a couple of additional documents that don't get into the compile. So when you compile the whole document and you export it, just for anyone that doesn't use it, it basically takes all of the parts that you've put in into like one core document outside of Scrivener, so you can convert it into a lot of different formats. But you can also have sections that don't go into the compile, like a notes section, which
Hmm.
is one of my favorite features of it, because I will have a for marketing purposes or extras or like little bonuses that I can give to people who sign up for my newsletter or anything like that. I have a document in each of my books called Killed Darlings. And it was things that I didn't really want to get rid of, but I had
Hmm.
to for the sake of the story. So sometimes that's like paragraphs of conversation. And sometimes that's just one line that I was like, man, this is so quote worthy, but it just doesn't fit anymore.
Hmm.
So I keep and I copy if I'm ever like when I'm editing, if I'm like, man, I really hate that I'm deleting this right now, I'll copy that whole section and put it into my Killed Darlings. Like, so then by the end, I have this whole thing of all of this extra kind of bonus content of like never before seen, or, it couldn't fit because of X, Y, or Z, but
Yeah.
gives you like that room to have that.
Yeah. And so in my first in Cairo, the North, I had a whole folder of, as you're going through I'm like, oh, you know what? This just isn't moving the story. Or I'm like, I love this scene, but uh, you just kind of
Yeah.
move it, and then you just have it, so you have it, but
Hmm.
then you can use it for other things as well. I
Yeah.
agree. I think that's a great tip. Um, so you're using Scrivener to write. What are
Hmm.
you using for your designing of your book or your publication of your book for
Um,
Amazon?
so this is where I'm going still so old school, and it's because I'm still operating out of Microsoft Word. People are going to be like, "What are you doing?" And then I actually have Scrivener export the ebook for me. I
Okay.
haven't had any complaints about formatting on any level. Like none of the reviews that have come in has said this is
I
formatted
didn't.
horribly. So
I,
we're all
I
good.
didn't see anything because I actually bought the Kindle version a
So
couple weeks
yeah.
ago. Um, so I use I was trying to figure out how I wanted to do it. I'm like, because I do have that experience with Adobe software, InDesign or whatever. I've actually
Hmm.
abandoned Adobe just because of some of the recent practices, and I use Affinity Studio for a lot of my bigger graphical stuff. But to me, I was trying to like, I don't want this to be tedious in terms of like laying out a 300-page book or a 200-page book. And I was trying to figure out what's the best way I can do this. And all of a sudden, this little program called Vellum came up into my
Yeah.
thing. So does Atticus came up too, which is cross-platform in a lot of ways. And then I just saw what Vellum did, and I was like, well, let me give it a try. And it's free. You could get to do everything in it for free until you're ready to export. And that's when they say, okay, now you have to give us the licensing fee, which to me is very reasonable. I mean, it's an old school licensing fee. I think it was like 150 for the ebook pub and like 250 for print and ebook at the same time, but it's a one-time licensing fee. So it's like you buy it, you're done. You don't have to pay monthly fees.
Yeah.
and all that. And it was a game changer for me. So, because it really took my Word file that, because it only takes Word, which was really interesting for me. It seems like this industry is based on Word. So I had to
A lot.
convert my Scrivener file to a Word file, but then the Word file was a little dirty, so then I had to open it up in Pages for Mac, and then I had to clean that up. Then I had to re-export that as a Word file because Pages takes that over. These are the little quirks and hubs
Yeah.
that you find, I've noticed. And then as soon as I dropped it into Vellum just said, "Give me 2 seconds," and then it just built the book. And it
Yeah.
said,
Which
"Okay, here's
is
a couple of things you need to think about," and then you just select the theme and you just kind of page through it. It gives you the live preview, and I was like, "Oh my god, this saved me weeks." And that way I didn't have to think so much about it, and it still made it fun. And
yeah.
so that was a really cool one. So talked about software, talked about processes and everything else. Sorry, I was going to sneeze
You're
for a
good.
second. I
You're good.
apologize.
I'm gonna take a moment to.
um,
It's getting that allergy season, so
a little bit.
already.
It's like 55 degrees today. I actually finally took
Yeah.
down the holiday lights today because the snow's gone finally. Um, so I think one of the things that I faced for me in terms of like writing challenges was trying to find, like there it is. That's what was causing it. Don't eat lunch before you do an interview. You
Yeah.
can get something stuck in your throat.
That's exactly
Um,
what I did. So,
um, what are your, challenges come up in life across the board? And is there any advice or tidbit you can give anybody, like writer's block or things that you can do that, as they come up, like do you have any tips on like how somebody might be able to like look at something or maybe just how something that you faced from a writing challenge and how you work through it?
um, yeah, I'm gonna think about this one. Um, because there's a lot, so I'm like trying to
Mm-hmm.
like think of what could be the most helpful, to kind of like learn from my experience. Um, One thing that I find challenging is finding other. Could you hear that?
I
No.
did, but it's
Okay.
all
We can maybe cut that.
actually I think
um,
I might leave it. It's kind of funny.
it's my that's the hose from 2 floors down. My husband, I guess, is watering. So okay, I would say that for me, building a community has been a little bit harder for me, and it's because I'm inherently kind of a shy person. So I kind of let other people approach me, which isn't always the best way to approach everything in life.
Hmm.
So I would say that community is huge because they can help motivate you along the way. They can, if you get stuck trying to think of a word, be the sounding board for like if you're like, I know there's a word that means this specific thing, but I can't remember it right now. And search bars are failing you and everything, but sometimes the community can come to arms and help you there. But
Yeah.
also just with keeping motivated, like I have a lot of different groups that I'm in with like word sprinting and stuff like that, and that's why I rejoined For the Words, because for me, since I'm kind of a bit of a competitive gamer, like I'm an achievement gamer, so like if there's an achievement like with For the Words, like slaying the monster, then it's going to work really well for me. Um so I think that having that community, and even if it's not with other writers, but if it's with readers who are your ARC readers or your beta readers, and kind of establishing that to help keep you motivated, because I think that's part of it, is that this journey can be so in your own head, because we're literally coming up with entire worlds in our own head, that
Hmm.
sometimes it's kind of isolating and lonely. And that's weird to say because you have all these characters bouncing around, but they're not real. So,
Right.
um, having that to fall back on in those moments. And I mean, you're not going to have success every single day. There's going to be days where you wake up and you make no money. There's going to be days where you wake up and you make 35 cents. There's going to be days you wake up and you make a lot more than that. Hopefully, like that's the goal, right? Is you make
Right.
a lot more than that. But I think that community is the thing that keeps me motivated to keep going, even on the days that are not as joyful as others. So having those people in your life that kind of remind you that why you started this journey to begin with, that it's about, you know, sharing your stories with other people. It's about having this more immersive experience with other people. And I think for me, like the challenge is how isolating it can feel. It's not necessarily isolating, it just feels that way sometimes.
Hmm. Yeah, I really agree with you on that one. I'm thinking back to like when I started. I was actually a home alone. My wife was actually away at a family event for the weekend, and I just started writing. And when she came home, she asked me, "What'd you do this weekend?" And I was like, "You ready?" I started writing, and she just kind of went, "Huh?" I'm
Yeah,
like, "Yeah," and she's like, "But you don't write," and I'm like, "I know." And
you
she
do
goes,
now.
"What'd you write?" She goes, "What'd you write?" I'm like, "Remember that Dungeons and Dragons character I was playing with?" And she's like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I started writing her backstory." Okay. And then I was actually kind of nervous to tell other people, especially like
Hmm.
my family, because we have the history of me. Every one of them said, "Go for it. Just
Yeah.
do it." And they're like, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about mistakes, or don't worry about it being perfect. Just keep doing it." And they kind of backed me up on that one, because there's days where I was like, "Why am I doing this? I'm
Hmm.
terrible." I'm like, "This is garbage. It doesn't make any sense." Or I'm like, "Okay, I'm not." And then you have those days where you're like, "Duh, duh, duh," you pump out 2 3 chapters, and you're just like, "What
Hmm.
happened there?" But every one of them like kind of embraced me. And honestly, the one that embraced me the most, and I was surprised, was a coworker of mine. She got wind of it. I'm not sure how, and she's like, "Give me a copy." And I was like, "No." I'm like, "No, no, 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 no." And she's like, "No, no, give me a copy." And I'm like, so I printed one out. It took like forever. It was like still like early on, and I kind of gave it to her. I'm like, so many things wrong with this still. She's like, "No." And then she walked over to me like 2 days later, and she put it down. She's like, "Keep going. There's things that are wrong with it." She goes, "But I wanted to know what was going to happen next."
Yeah.
So, and I was just like, "Really?" She's like, "Just do it. Keep writing." And I just kind of came up with the phrase of just keep writing forward, because you never know.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, I had them over, because the people I really trusted the most, I knew were going to be the most brutally honest. They weren't
Yeah.
going to sugarcoat it. So I gave them a rough copy of it, and they said, "No, we kept turning. We have questions, because certain things we need more clarity on."
Hmm.
Or like, they're like, "Because you're seeing it, but we're having trouble seeing it."
Yeah.
So they were giving me really, really good feedback to say, "Oh, okay." So then I went back and disappeared for like 3 months, and came back with an extra 128 pages to the story to help flesh it out more.
Yeah.
So, but to me, I think you're totally right, though. Looping back to what you're saying is having that community to springboard off of, or run ideas by, or just say, "What are your thoughts on this?" Or, "What's a word that means blah, blah, blah?" Because I'm like,
Yeah.
I know there's a word, I just can't think of it. Like, I thought I had a real word, and my wife's like, "That's not a real word." And I'm like, "Yeah, it is." And I was like, she's like, "I'm going to just say one thing. You thought it was a scapegoat for years for a scapegoat." And I'm like, "Do we need to bring that up again?" And she's just like, because I was so positive it was a scapegoat, because you're escaping out of something, you're getting out of it, because it makes sense. And then I looked it up. I'm like, "Look, see, blah blah blah," and then the definition on Urban Dictionary is, "These are for people that think it's a scapegoat, but it's scapegoat." That was how they ended, and I was just like, "I'm done." Uh,
That's
so
amazing.
yeah, it's one of her favorite stories. She brings it up quite often. So and when we talk about various things. But it was my mistake. It's all on me. So there are certain things that really inspire me, like authors, artists. Like Morbius to me is like this god artist for science fiction and fantasy, or same thing for illustrations. I grew up looking at Dungeons and Dragon cover manuals, just trying to figure out who are these artists, and I would just look at them and like try to mimic their work and stuff like that. Is there any author or artist that kind of like grabs you, that kind of inspires you?
Um, it's so interesting because that's changed so much from like when I
Mm-hmm.
originally started writing to now. Um, some I think the author that like I just want to curl up and fall asleep inside their words like is probably Harley LaRue. Their writing is absolutely like amazing. And uh that work is just it's very lyrical, but it's very dark, and it's very much so something that I don't know, it just vibes perfectly with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um there's a lot of others. Like I tend to read a lot of indies, and I tend to test the waters a lot. So I'll have like an ongoing list. I'll like read the first book and then I'll add to like this is a list of series that I'm continuing, and that is so long at this point. um but I think also like film has a lot of impact on me too. In
Mm-hmm.
college, I was a TV slash video major as well as a writing, literature, and publishing major. So I have a film background, and one of the biggest compliments that anyone's ever given me is that my books kind of read like you could translate them into film very easily, and I'm like, cool, because that's kind of my style. So it's like my history in a nutshell. So
Yeah, yeah. I kind of, when I'm writing, I kind of see it as a motion picture in my head.
yeah,
Like I just kind of
exactly.
see it kind of doing. You know, Sometimes I see it as an anime. Sometimes, just
Okay,
a
yeah.
fan of anime. I mean, I grew up way back in the day when anime was barely around, and I was like latching onto it really, really heavily ago. And I'm like, this is my ultimate form of animation cartoons. Um,
What was some of your favorites?
oh, um, so I didn't realize it at the time, but Nausicaa Valley of the Wind by Miyo Mosagi. I saw that when I was like 5 or 8 years old, and I just remember watching it and going, "What is this?" Uh, it's unlike any other cartoon I've ever seen. And then from there, it was Robotech, or Macross, known almost everywhere else. And then, I mean, obviously there's the Transformers and all that, but the anime that really cemented me was probably the Bubblegum Crisis series. When I was in high school, basically it's Terminator meets Blade Runner meets um, really strong, powerful female characters in battle mech suits, that are kind of mercenaries. I've always loved strong female characters in any work. I think that's why I Nausicaa Valley when strong female character, innocent, um, challenging, and she's able to overcome a lot of stuff and also kind of still hold on to who she is. Um, Same thing with the Bubblegum Crisis series. Vampire Hunter D was also another one for me. I've always loved the vampire dark synergy
Mhm.
stuff. And I just have so many. I mean, Akira is almost like a go-to in a lot of ways. I'm not sure if you've ever seen Akira.
I
Um,
haven't seen a lot of these.
you
So
haven't?
no,
You
I
haven't?
haven't.
Oh,
Yeah.
Akira will blow your mind. That came out in 1989, and what they did with that one, there's like this much CGI in it, and it's all hand drawn, hand animated, and it moves like real life rotoscoping, but it was all hand
Mm,
drawn.
cool.
And their color palette use was so interesting. Instead of night scenes being blues and blacks, they were greens and reds.
Hmm.
It's just they just had such crazy art direction on it. And there's just so many of them. I mean, my personal favorite animated series though of all time is Arcane now. When
Hmm.
that dropped, it was like watching moving Rembrandt paintings for me when
Yeah.
I saw it. And
Arcade's
it used,
beautiful.
yeah, and their use of traditional animation with 3D, and there's very little 3D lighting. All the lighting in that is actually painted.
Mm,
So like when you see the highlights or any of that, it's all hand painted highlights. Like the artist says, I want this bright. And if you ever get a chance, watch Bridging the Rift on YouTube. It's the whole making of season one. It will blow your mind in terms of what they went through to make that series, and it took them
yeah.
9 years to get it out. So yeah, because Chris, the showrunner, was like, "Can I have like $1,000 to do something with Riot Games?" And then he's like, "Okay, $2,000." And he kept coming back, and they're like, "You're not coming. You're not going away." He's like, "No, I really want to do this." So, but yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. I want to keep onto our schedule. So,
Yep.
um, in our kind of closing thoughts, I just want to give you the opportunity. What do you have coming up? What do people have forward to looking coming from you in this year, maybe next year? So this is your opportunity to let us know.
Hopefully this year. It's the book one is already in the hands of alpha readers. I have not disclosed the title or anything. So you know what? Let's do it here. The book one is going to be called Drag Her Down. It is a demon romance.
Wow.
And it has like horror slash slasher vibes, but it's like
Okay.
the romance is going to be parallel to the horror slasher. So the horror slasher does not intermix with the romance. So
Cool. I
it'll
have
be,
actually seen those WIP posts on your Instagram account. I'm going,
yeah.
what's going on here? But
With my
wow.
ominous towel racks aren't supposed to bend that way.
Well, I feel super honored that you let us know that. That's amazing. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm stoked. It's going to be the first in a duet, and I'm already about 22,000 words into the sequel. My goal is to get the sequel written before book one drops because I'm trying to drop book two very quickly after book one comes out. So, and that's kind
Okay.
of what I did with Blood Hunted, is that a lot of people are like, how did you publish this whole series in less than a year? I'm like, well, I already had book one and two written before book one came out. So that's how that worked.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
taking the time to talk with us. So everybody get a chance, check out Ariel Rae's social media information will be pinned below in the comments in the more section, as well as sign up. And if you like this, let us know. Thank you so much, Aria. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you for having me.